On my 16th birthday, the rain was falling very hard in Columbus, Ohio. The sky was dark and gray and the wind pushed cold water into my face. My name is Soleil Sullivan and I was standing in my living room, holding a tiny cupcake they gave me. The cupcake was so small it almost looked like a joke. I held it in both hands thinking maybe this year something would finally be different. Maybe this birthday would not feel lonely or scary. But deep down I knew better. My dad opened the front door and looked right at me. His face was hard like a rock and he didn't blink. "You're old enough now," he said. "Get out. We're done carrying dead weight." His words hit me like someone pushing me into ice water. Behind him, my stepmom Vela smirked in that mean little way she always did, like she enjoyed hurting me. My 14-year-old half-sister Zinnia folded her arms, rolled her eyes and said loudly, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Leave already. Don't make the house smell worse than it already does." There was no yelling from them, no surprise, no second chance. Just the door slamming in my face and the lock clicking. That click felt like a giant door closing on my whole life. I walked and walked until my shoes were full of water. Rain dripped into my socks. The cold soaked into my bones. I slept on park benches at night, curled up like a tiny animal trying to hide. I learned which shelters for teens stayed open late and which ones closed their doors after 9. One of them turned me away because I didn't have an ID. I had nowhere safe to go. Weeks later, I was behind a Tim Hortons at dawn. The sky was still dim and sleepy and I was digging through trash cans trying to find something still wrapped in plastic. Something that wasn't too dirty to eat. That was when a shiny black SUV rolled up quietly beside me. A man wearing an expensive coat stepped out into the cold rain without an umbrella. "Soleil Sullivan," he said. I froze. My whole body tightened, ready to run. But the man didn't flinch when he saw my dirt, my smell, my wild hair, or my torn clothes. His voice stayed calm. "My name is Corvin Hargrove. Your great-aunt passed away. She left everything to you. But you have to agree to one condition right now." I didn't understand. I didn't even know I had a great-aunt. But before I could ask anything, he opened the SUV door for me. His coat dripped rain, but he didn't seem to care. I slid into the warm leather seat. The heater blasted warm air onto my freezing fingers, but it couldn't chase away the cold feeling inside my chest. I didn't say anything. I just stared at my hands. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to go way back. Back to when all the trouble in my life first started. My real mom died in a car crash on I-270 when I was only 5 years old. One second she was singing along with the radio, smiling, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. The next second, a huge truck crossed the yellow line and hit us hard. I still remember the smell of the hospital hallway, the sharp, clean, scary smell, when my dad held my little hand and told me she wasn't coming home. A year later, he brought Vela home. Vela smiled too big, like she wanted to look kind but wasn't. She hugged me too tight, like she was trying too hard. And she moved her stuff into our house before the flowers at my mom's funeral had even finished drying out. That felt wrong. I didn't know why, but it did. And months later, my half-sister Zinnia was born, crying loud and strong. From that day on, I became the leftover kid in my own house. Vela never hit me. She was too clever for that. But she made sure I always knew I didn't belong. I had a different last name on the first day of school. I had different rules. I had to follow different chores and different punishments. Everything was different for me. My dad changed too. At first, it wasn't a big thing. He stayed up late at night on the computer after working at the used car lot. His eyes looked red and he said he was checking sports scores. But then overtime stopped. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. I found out later that he was gambling on websites, using credit cards to pay off other credit cards, and taking money from casino machines in West Virginia. By the time I turned 12, the house felt small and cramped. It felt like the walls were closing in. People called the house about money. Repossession trucks drove slowly around our block. Vela whispered that I was the reason money was tight because Dad was still paying child support for me even though I lived there. Zinnia picked it up fast. She walked by me at school and whispered, "Mistake," loud enough for her friends to giggle. My dad lost his job right after I turned 15. The car dealership closed and no one wanted to hire a man who had shaky hands and a record showing he gambled too much. The fights in the house got louder. Vela shouted about losing the house. Dad yelled that he was close to a big win. I started disappearing into the library after school and stayed until closing. Anywhere felt better than home. Then came my 16th birthday. Vela texted me, Come straight home. We have a surprise party for you. For one moment, a tiny spark of hope lit up inside me. Maybe, just maybe, something would be good. But when I walked inside, the living room was dark except for a tiny candle stuck in a grocery store cupcake. Dad, Vela, and Zinnia stood in a half circle. Their faces were blank. There were no balloons, no decorations, no wrapped presents. Just an envelope on the table and black trash bags already packed with my clothes. Vela spoke first. Her voice was sweet but sharp like a knife hidden in a cupcake. We can't keep doing this, Theron. The bank gave us 30 days. We have to sell the house. Dad didn't look me in the eyes. You're 16 now. In Ohio, that's old enough to live on your own. Zinnia rolled her eyes and said, we even put your toothbrush in the bag. You're welcome. I held that tiny cupcake while the candle burned down and dripped hot wax on my hand. I didn't even feel the burn. All I heard was Vela saying, take what you need and go. Do not come back. We're changing the locks tonight. So I left. I walked out into the rain with the backpack they packed for me. I never once looked over my shoulder. I had $23 from my mom's sister who still sent birthday cards. I had no phone. No home. No plan. The first night I slept under the slide at Goodale Park. The second night a teen shelter turned me away because I didn't have any ID. After the first week, I knew which restaurant dumpsters got emptied late at night, which churches kept a side door unlocked, and how to make myself look small so adults wouldn't yell at me to move. I learned that no one was coming to save me. And that was exactly when the black SUV pulled up behind the Tim Hortons and everything changed. Corvin drove the SUV into an empty diner parking lot and turned the engine off. He waited until a waitress brought 2 steaming coffees to a booth in the corner. Then he slid a leather folder across the table toward me. Inside was one photograph. An old woman with sharp blue eyes sitting on a porch swing. Behind her you could see the city of Cincinnati. This is Avalini Whitford, he said, your great-aunt on your mother's side. She passed away 8 days ago at age 90. She had no husband, no children, and no close family except you. I stared at the picture. I had never heard the name before. Not once. Corvin kept talking, his voice calm. Avalini worked very hard her whole life. She started as a welder during the war. Then she bought part of a small steel plant outside Cincinnati in the 1950s. She grew it into Whitford Holdings. When she sold the company in 2009, the money she got, plus buildings she owned and other investments, added up to $52 million after taxes. $52 million. The number didn't even feel real to me. It was too big. Felt like a fairy tale number. Corvin tapped the photo gently. 3 years ago she changed her will. Everything goes to you, Soleil Sullivan, the only biological granddaughter of her favorite niece. There's one rule. You must show up at her estate in Cincinnati within 72 hours of being told. If you don't, all the money goes to a charity that helps homeless kids. There are no second chances. I finally whispered, why 72 hours? Because Avalini believed that if someone couldn't fight for something when they had nothing, they shouldn't have it when they had everything. He checked his watch. I told you 41 minutes ago. You have about 71 hours left. A private jet is waiting at Rickenbacker Airport. We can leave in 30 minutes. I looked down at my hands. They were cracked from the cold. Dirt lived under my nails. My hoodie, which used to be gray, was now a muddy brown color. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to stay angry at the world. But the bigger part, the part that had slept under playground slides and eaten cold food from trash cans, knew this was the only door that had ever opened for me. I nodded. Corvin paid the bill and led me outside. 20 minutes later we drove through a private gate near Columbus. A shiny white Gulfstream jet waited on the runway with its lights on and engines spinning gently. A woman in a navy suit handed me a plastic bag with new sweatpants, a clean t-shirt and sneakers that were exactly my size. I went into the airport bathroom, took a long shower, washed off weeks of dirt and walked back out feeling like someone completely new. When I stepped onto the plane, the flight attendant closed the door behind me. Corvin sat across the aisle and handed me a thick binder. Read the summary during the flight. We land at London Airport. The estate is a 15-minute drive from there. The jet lifted into the sky quickly. Columbus shrank beneath the clouds and for the first time in weeks I was warm. I opened the binder. The first page was a letter in Avalini's own handwriting. To my great-niece Soleil, if you are reading this, then you already know what it feels like to be thrown away. I know that feeling too. Cincinnati, 1943. I was 17, pregnant and kicked out with nothing but the clothes on my back. I promised myself that if I ever made a good life I would give someone else the chance I never got. That someone is you. But nothing is free. You will learn the rest when you arrive. Come quickly. Avellini. I traced the letters with my finger. The jet turned south over the Ohio River, and the lights of Cincinnati sparkled like tiny stars below. I had 71 hours. I was not going to waste a single minute. The plane landed at London Airport as the sky turned pale pink. A black Mercedes waited on the runway. Corvin opened the back door and we drove east along the river. The road curved and twisted. After 20 minutes, we passed tall iron gates and followed a long driveway lined with huge old oak trees. Then the house appeared. A giant, beautiful house made of brick and limestone with 3 floors, wide porches and tall chimneys. The Ohio River shined like silver behind it. Inside, the air smelled like lemon oil and old books. And that was where everything new in my life was about to begin. A housekeeper who looked like someone's kind grandma nodded at me once and then quietly walked away. He did not say anything at all. Corvin, the tall man who helped take care of the mansion, looked at me with a calm face. Then he gently led me up a huge, wide staircase that felt like something from a castle. My footsteps echoed in the big house as we climbed higher. We walked down a long hallway with black and white pictures hanging on both sides of the walls. The pictures showed strong men working with steel, sparks flying, and big factory floors full of machines. Everything looked old and serious, like history frozen in time. At the end of the hallway was a giant wooden door made of thick, heavy oak. Corvin typed a secret code on the door lock. It beeped, clicked, and then he pushed it open slowly. He stepped aside so I could enter first. The room was a study. It looked exactly how Beatrice had left it before she passed away. A hospital bed still sat in one corner with machines around it, but all the machines were off and dark. Her desk sat in front of huge windows that stretched from the floor all the way up to the ceiling. The windows looked out over water that sparkled gently. On her desk was a shiny silver laptop. Corvin pressed a button and the screen turned bright. Beatrice Whitford appeared on the screen. She was 90 years old in the video. Her white hair was thin, and there were little tubes in her nose to help her breathe. But her eyes were still bright blue and full of strength. She looked right into the camera, almost like she was looking at me through time. Her voice was scratchy and raspy, but it was steady and sure. "Soleil," she said, "if you are watching this, it means you arrived in time." "Good. That tells me something important about you already." Her voice made the room feel still and quiet. "I was 17 years old in 1943, she continued. "My father shut the door behind me in Chicago. I was pregnant. I had no money. I didn't finish high school. I slept in cold doorways on Wabash Avenue. One night, a 12-year-old newsboy shared his hot dog with me and told me a church basement nearby was warm and safe. That single act saved my life. I will never forget him." She breathed in and kept going. "I worked during the war as a welder. I welded ship plates at Pullman. I saved every penny. In 1952 I joined 5 other women no bank trusted, and we bought a steel mill that was almost dead. Everyone thought we'd fail. But we didn't. We rebuilt it. By 1980 my company Whitford Holdings employed 3,000 people. And I owned most of it." She paused for a moment. "I never married again. I never had more children. My work became my family." The room felt heavy and important. 3 years ago, doctors told me I had only months left," she said softly. "So I began looking for the last person in my family who still carried kindness in their heart. Someone like my niece, your mother, who died too young. I hired investigators. They showed me pictures of your father who gambled away everything. They showed me your stepmother who treated you like furniture. Then they showed me you, getting straight A's, working nights at a gas station, giving your last $5 to a kid with torn shoes." Her old face softened. "That was enough for me." Her voice grew firm again. "Here's the deal. And there are no changes allowed." I leaned closer without meaning to. "You will receive full control of a $52 million trust. You cannot spend the big money until you turn 25, but you can spend the money it earns and the money meant to help others. In the next 5 years, you must personally help at least 80 homeless or nearly homeless kids under 21. You must get them permanent housing, education, or training. You must be there when they get their house keys. You must be there for report cards and training contracts. Corvin and an auditor will check everything. Her blue eyes burned bright again. If you say yes and finish all 80 cases, everything becomes yours on your 21st birthday. If you say no or fail, every penny goes to a fund for homeless kids in Ohio and Kentucky. Your father and his wife get nothing. That is on purpose. Then she said quietly, I am not buying your forgiveness, Soleil. I am giving you the choice I never had. You can turn pain into power, or you can let it rot you. Choose. The screen went dark. The room felt silent and huge. Corvin closed the laptop gently. Take your time, he said kindly. A guest room is prepared if you want to think or rest. But I did not need rest. I did not need time either. I looked out at the river through the huge windows. Sunlight danced on the water. Something inside me felt bright and strong like a flame being lit. I accept, I said. My voice did not shake at all. Corvin smiled just a little. I thought you would. The papers are on the desk. Sign where the tabs are. The pen was real silver and heavy in my hand. I signed every page carefully. When the ink dried, Corvin pushed a set of keys across the desk. Welcome home, Miss Sullivan. The trust activated the moment you signed. Your first $5 million for operating costs arrives tomorrow morning at 9. I squeezed the keys so hard that they pressed into my skin. 80 kids. 5 years. And I already knew where to find the first one. 5 years later, the scared, dirty 16-year-old I once was had grown into someone new, stronger, calmer, and 21 years old. Beatrice's home now lived inside a huge 4-story brick warehouse on East 8th Street in downtown Cincinnati. It was only 10 minutes away from the beautiful River Mansion, which had become both our headquarters and the place I truly lived. We ran 3 group homes in Hamilton County. We ran 2 group homes in northern Kentucky. We had special apartments around the city where teenagers could practice living on their own. Every kid who came to us got a bed that same day. They got a caseworker the very next morning. Before the first week ended, they had a real plan for their life. Soren Ortiz was in charge of almost everything. I had found Soren when he was 15 years old, hiding under the Brent Spence Bridge. He had a broken arm and a backpack full of stolen library books. But inside he had a bright mind and a good heart. He was the very first kid I helped. The first name on my list the day I signed the papers. Now he is 20. He stood tall and steady. He wore his Avellini's home shirt like armor. He could talk to judges, landlords, scared kids, anyone without ever yelling. He was the brother I never had. We had already helped 79 kids. Only one more kid left. One more and the entire $52 million would unlock forever. Then I could help even more kids. That afternoon I sat in a conference room on the 3rd floor, looking through scholarship files. My assistant buzzed my phone. Mr. Harrove on line 1, she said. He says it's urgent. Corvin almost never called with urgent news. I picked it up. Soleil, he said, your father has stage 4 small cell lung cancer. The doctors confirmed it last week. He has no insurance. Even basic treatment costs over $1 million. Vela left him 2 years ago. Zinnia is 19. She is using meth and sleeping on couches in Dayton. All 3 of them are downstairs in the lobby right now asking to see you. I put the phone down and walked to the window. Outside I saw my father, Theron. He leaned against the brick wall, coughing into a cloth with red blood spots. He looked 70 even though he was only 53. His face was thin and tired. His Bengals hat was pulled low. Vela was gone. Only Theron and Zinnia were there. Zinnia had marks all down her arms from drug use. She twitched and rocked like her body couldn't sit still. She kept looking toward the door like she thought the police would come at any moment. Security had already told them we could not take adults over 21, but they wouldn't leave. Some of our teenage residents stood on the steps watching them. Soren appeared next to me. You want me to have security remove them? He asked quietly. I watched my father slide down the wall until he was sitting on the ground. Zinnia was shouting and lighting one cigarette after another. Something cold and heavy settled inside my stomach. No, I said. Let them in. Conference room in 10 minutes. Soren raised one eyebrow but didn't argue. He understood. I walked downstairs and opened the lobby door myself. Theron looked up with wet red eyes. Soleil baby please. Zinnia sneered. Look at you. Acting all perfect in your little charity palace. I said nothing. I just turned and walked toward the elevator. They followed behind me like stray dogs who didn't know if I would feed them or kick them. In the conference room, I sat at the head of the table. Soren stood behind me. Corvin joined on speakerphone. Theron began crying before the door even closed. Zinnia stood with her arms crossed, rocking back and forth. I slid 3 folders across the table. The first folder had papers showing that my father qualified for emergency health coverage and a list of hospice centers that took people with no insurance. The second folder had names and phone numbers of rehab centers with open beds. The third folder had applications for benefits and information about 2 shelters for women with addiction. Avellini's home only helps minors, I said. That rule will never change. You are adults. These are the resources for adults. This is everything we are allowed to give. Theron cried harder. You're my daughter. I said. When I turned 16 you told me I wasn't anymore. The paperwork still says that. Zinnia slammed her fist on the table. You owe us. Soren took 1 step forward. She fell silent instantly. I stood up. Security will walk you out. Do not come back. Theron tried to grab my hand. I pulled away. The door closed behind them. I looked at the whiteboard on the wall. 79 names. 1 line is still empty. That same night, in a tiny apartment, a 15-year-old girl named Azura packed a small bag while her mother screamed at her. Azura texted our crisis number. By midnight she had a bed, a worker and a plan. I wrote her name on the board. 80. The trust unlocked at 12:01 a.m. I did not sleep. I stood on the roof of the big warehouse building. The night was dark and cool and I could see the shiny city lights blinking on and off across the wide Ohio River. The lights danced on the water like tiny stars. This was the same river that Avellini had watched for 70 years before she died. Felt like a big book in my life had finally closed. Something old was ending and something new was beginning. Then I walked back inside and let the 3 people into the glass-walled meeting room on the 4th floor. The room was bright and see-through like a giant fish tank. Theron came first. He walked slowly and carefully. He held a wrinkled Kroger grocery bag in his hands. Looked very sad because that bag held everything he owned in the whole world. He hugged it to his chest like it was precious. Behind him, Vela crawled into the room on her knees the second the door clicked shut. Her mascara ran down her cheeks like black tears. She used to look strong and full of pride, always lifting her chin and acting like she was better than everyone. But now she looked small, scared and tired. Her cheeks used to be full and round but now they looked hollow. Zinnia came last. She slammed the door behind her so hard that the blinds shook on their metal cords. Her pupils were huge and shaky, like she had been crying or using something bad. She stood behind the others, arms crossed, eyes wild. Theron spoke first. He didn't even sit down. He just blurted it out. It's in my lungs, Soleil, he said. Both sides. Both lobes. The doctor said if I don't get strong chemo right away, I'll only live a few more months. Maybe even less. The bills are already more than $200,000. And I haven't even started the treatment. His voice cracked at the end and his bag rustled as his hands shook. Vela crawled to me and grabbed the bottom of my jeans, holding tight like a little kid terrified of being left behind. Please, she begged. I know we hurt you. I know what we did was awful. But he's dying. You have money now. Just write 1 check. 1 check and he lives. Please. Zinnia laughed. It was a loud, sharp, broken laugh like glass cracking. Oh look, she said in a high, mean voice. Look at mommy begging the little princess. You think you're better than us, don't you? Just because some dead old lady took pity on you? You owe us. You owe us everything, you ungrateful. Her voice echoed in the glass room for a moment, bouncing off the walls. Then it finally stopped. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. I simply placed 3 thin brown manila folders on the table. 1 in front of each of them. Theron reached forward first. His fingers shook like leaves in the wind. He opened his folder. Inside were printed papers from the Ohio Medicaid office. They said he had already been approved for emergency medical coverage. The papers said the coverage started on the same day he got sick, not from today. That meant he didn't have to pay the huge bills he was scared of. The folder also had information sheets for a hospital charity program that helps people with no money, and 2 hospice centers that take very sick people for free. Vela opened hers. Inside were papers for 3 state-run rehab centers for adults who needed help stopping drugs. All 3 places had empty beds this week. They were all close, within 50 miles of Cincinnati. There were also instructions on how to get there, what to bring, and who to call. Zinnia's folder looked almost the same, but it had extra papers. It had applications for the Hamilton County Drug Court Program, which helps people who got in trouble because of drugs. It also had papers for 2 women's shelters that take people who are still using. They do not turn them away. I leaned back in my chair. These, I said calmly, are the things the state of Ohio gives to adults who need help. Avalini's Home, the charity I run now, is a 501c3 organization. That means every single dollar must go to helping children under 21. If I give even a penny to any of you, the law says the trust must close down. That means every single kid in our program loses their home. I will not do that. I looked each of them in the eyes one by one. It is not personal, I said quietly. It is the law. Theron opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. But I'm your father, he said. No, I said softly. You stopped being my father the day you handed me a trash bag on my 16th birthday and told me I was old enough to survive on my own. The state agreed with you then. And the state agrees with me now. Vela wailed louder. She banged her head on the table like she wanted to knock sense into herself. I'll do anything, she cried. I'll sign anything. Just help us. There is nothing to sign, I said. There is only the door. Zinnia suddenly jumped across the table, reaching for me with long sharp nails like claws. Her face twisted with anger. But Soren, who had been standing quietly behind me the whole time, moved fast. He caught Zinnia's wrist in midair. He didn't hurt her. He just set her back in her chair like she weighed no more than a feather. She spit at my feet. I stood. On the day you locked me out, I said, you taught me what family meant to you. Today I choose the family I have left. The 80 kids who never got to choose the people who gave birth to them. You 3 are not on that list. I walked to the door and held it open. Security came in at once. 2 guards wearing Avalini's Home polos. They each took Theron by an elbow. He didn't fight. Vela had to be half-carried. She was screaming my name over and over like it was a curse. Zinnia flipped me off with both hands until the elevator doors closed between us. When the glass door shut, the silence felt like cold water pouring into the room. I went to my office. I printed the last papers for my final case of the year. I signed my name where the auditor needed it. The file said, Case number 80. Azure Marie Evans, age 15. Thrown out of home after parents sold her laptop for drug money. Taken in at 11:47 p.m. Given a bed at our group home. Enrolled at a high school. I carried the file to the giant whiteboard and wrote her name under the other 79. The independent auditor came at 11:59 p.m. He checked everything, stamped the papers, and shook my hand. At 1:21 a.m. my phone buzzed. The bank message popped up. $52 million. Unrestricted. All yours. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel revenge. I just felt finished. I turned off the lights and walked through the empty hallways, past pictures of all the kids we had saved. Then I took the elevator to the roof again. The city was still quiet. Somewhere far below me, 3 people who used to share my last name were finally learning what rock bottom felt like. I didn't hate them anymore. I just didn't know them. Winter came early that year. The kind of cold that bites through coats and makes the Ohio River look like a flat piece of gray stone. Theron died on a Tuesday in late January at the University of Cincinnati Hospital. A social worker called Corvin because my old number was still listed as his emergency contact on some old form. Theron lived only 3 days after our meeting. Medicaid paid for comfort care only. The stronger medicine he needed required money he didn't have. His death paper said metastatic small cell carcinoma and respiratory failure. There was no funeral. The county cremated him. Corvin forwarded me the obituary. I didn't go. I didn't send flowers. I didn't cry. Vela lost her house in March. The foreclosure auction happened on the courthouse steps in Columbus. She sat in her rusty old Corolla across the street, the heater running so she wouldn't freeze. When someone else bought her home, she drove south on I-71 with whatever would fit in the trunk. She stayed in cheap motels along the highway, Red Roof Inn, Super 8, until the credit card stopped working. By May, her phone was disconnected. No one ever heard from her again. Zinnia ran away from rehab halfway through the program. A few weeks later, she stole razor blades from one Kroger, then steak and laundry soap from another, then makeup and cold medicine from a third. Every store had clear cameras. The police arrested her with $412 of stolen stuff in a stolen stroller. Because she had stolen before, the judge sent her to prison for 20 months. Her inmate number is now 874. She behaves she might get out next year. None of them tried to reach me. No calls. No letters. Nothing. But while their lives faded away, Avelini's home grew brighter and stronger. We opened a new 12-bed home in Cleveland in February. Then another in Dayton by June. With the money I had earned, we bought our buildings instead of renting. We hired full-time therapists. We filled every pantry with food, every closet with clean clothes, every schedule with hope. By fall, we were helping over 300 kids. In November, I won the Young Philanthropist of the Year award. At the ceremony, I stood under a shining chandelier in a simple black dress. People clapped while they read the numbers. 312 kids housed, 187 high school diplomas, 94 trade certificates. Not a single kid returning to homelessness. The applause sounded far away. Soren sat in the front row in a tux. He looked so proud it made my heart hurt. I thanked the board, the staff, the teachers, everyone. Then I said, "This award is not mine. It belongs to the kids who worked so hard." Later, a reporter asked if I felt like I had gotten revenge. "No," I said. "I feel free." Snow fell quietly as Soren and I drove home. The past felt buried under the white snow. Months later, at a gala in Cincinnati, the ballroom sparkled with 1,000 tiny lights. I wore a simple midnight blue dress. People clapped as they listed our new numbers. 543 kids housed, 211 college scholarships, a 98% graduation rate. I stood at the podium and said I had one more thing to share. Corvin stepped out from the wings with a small leather folder. I held up the papers. Today, the court approved my request to adopt Soren Ortiz as my son. The room gasped. I asked Soren to come to the stage. He walked like he was floating. I hugged him tighter than I had ever hugged anyone. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. The applause exploded. Soren cried into my shoulder. Then, into the microphone, he whispered the words that made the whole room fall apart. "Can we go home now, Mom?" People cried. People cheered. They chanted, "Mom, Mom, Mom," so loudly the chandeliers shook. We walked off stage hand in hand while the orchestra played, "You'll Never Walk Alone." Outside, snow fell again, soft and quiet. Soren told me he had been calling me Mom in his head for 3 years. I kissed his forehead and said I had thought of him as my son ever since he let me cry in that private jet bathroom and kept the secret. We drove back to the mansion on the hill. All the kids were awake waiting for us. When we walked through the door, 40 teenagers in pajamas yelled, "Welcome home, Mom." Someone had hung a huge banner that said, "Welcome to your forever family." I stood in the middle of all their laughing faces and warm hugs, snow melting in my hair. Soren put his arm around me. I smiled, a real smile, a free smile. This was the true treasure, not the $52 million, but the 543 hearts that kept beating because mine never gave up. And one tall young man who chose me right back.